Now that Super Tuesday is in the books, where does the GOP go from here? We look at the key dates on the long road to Tampa in this week's Video Crystal Ball. Well, it was a most interesting night, a great Super Tuesday, and everybody has different takeaways. Here at the Crystal Ball, we tend to see a couple of things above all. The first is that it's clear there isn't going to be a eureka moment, as there has been for so many of the nominating contests in modern American history. You're not going to have an evening where everyone says, well, that's it, we can pack up. It's obvious that Mitt Romney is the nominee. There's still too much resistance to Mitt Romney, and therefore too much support for other candidates, particularly Rick Santorum. Maybe it's that Republicans are trying to send a message to Mitt Romney, making him endure these weekly battles because they don't believe that he truly believes in the conservative principles that they embrace. They're trying to drum those principles into his head. Maybe looking at the class differences, the fact that Romney can't seem to appeal to those making middle incomes or lesser incomes, perhaps they see in Mitt Romney a candidate recalling some earlier Republican candidates who was born on third base and thought he hit a triple. They want to convey to him very clearly that he was born on third base, and they want to help him connect with people who are of modest means, something that Romney, the son of the head of GM, the son of the governor of Michigan, probably didn't experience much early in life. Now, given what happened on Super Tuesday, this race is clearly going on. So we at the Crystal Ball have identified 6 key days on the road to Tampa, which will determine whether the Republican National Convention is a unified convention, whether it has the spirit to propel Mitt Romney forward, or whether it will hold him back. The first date is March 13th, next Tuesday. We have 3 contests on March 13th, Alabama, Hawaii, Mississippi. Frankly, we see only Hawaii as leaning to Mitt Romney. Alabama and Mississippi will go to one of the not Romneys. And by the way, there are 2 other contests around March 13th that also are not favorable to Mitt Romney. Kansas on March 10th and Missouri on March 17th. When you put 4 of those 5 contests together, probably leaning against Romney, we will see once again how the Wall Street concept of the dead cat bounce applies to Mitt Romney as well. He can't seem to generate Mitt-mentum. He wins on one Tuesday, it doesn't seem to have any effect on the next Tuesday. The next day on the road to Tampa is April 3rd, and this will be a day that will be much more favorable for Mitt Romney. Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Wisconsin, those 3 contests we believe will lean to Mitt Romney, though Wisconsin may be a struggle, particularly with Rick Santorum, who's doing well in the Midwest. The third day on the road to Tampa is April 24th, and this will be Mitt Romney's best day, at least until the end of the primary process. Connecticut, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. This is a northeastern day. That is Romney's strength. Obviously, Rick Santorum will be expected to win Pennsylvania and win it handsomely, just as Newt Gingrich won Georgia. That's his home state, or at least the state he represented in Congress from 1990 until 2006, and Santorum will see the pressure on him. But otherwise, Romney's going to do very well that day. The next day on the road to Tampa is May 8th, and we see this as being a very difficult day for Mitt Romney. Indiana, North Carolina, and West Virginia, all of these states will probably lean to a not Mitt Romney, and we suspect that will be Rick Santorum. Could always be Newt Gingrich if he's still in and kicking as well. But those are tough states. You look at the demographics of the states, and you can see that they're not likely to be in Romney's camp. Then we go to the big state of Texas on May 29th, the next day on the road to Tampa. Texas is clearly anti-Romney, assuming we still have those anti-Romney candidates in the mix. Governor Perry is backing Newt Gingrich, and many of the evangelical ministers, and evangelicals are a big part of the GOP base in Texas, they clearly favor Rick Santorum. So that's not going to be the best day for Mitt Romney. He will dread the day after Memorial Day. Then we move to the final big day on the road to Tampa, June 5th. That is the last big primary day, dominated by two giants, California and New Jersey, along with primaries in Montana, New Mexico, and South Dakota. We see California and New Jersey as being heavily inclined toward Mitt Romney. That's a packet of 225 delegates right there, and that's likely to go into Mitt Romney's camp. It may very well be the votes that puts him over the 1,144 majority that he needs. If he's just a few delegates short, he has a bonus right at the end of June. It's Utah, it's his state. Romney will win it by a large majority, and those delegates should be the ones to put him over the top if June 5th is not. Now we have some questions from Twitter submitted to the Crystal Ball. The first one is from Tristan Abbey. And the question is, why was there zero pre-super polling for Idaho, Alaska, North Dakota, and almost zero for Vermont? Well, I think it's a shame. We'd like to see polls everywhere. They certainly help guide the forecast, but remember, it's a matter of money. For the pollsters, they generally have to have a sponsor. They have to have a reason for going in a state. The caucus states are also very difficult to poll, and 3 of them were caucus states. Only Vermont was a primary. So that's just the way it goes. It's a matter of dollars and cents. Remember, these polling agencies are profit-making for the most part. Next, we have a question from our friend and colleague, Professor Hagel, out of Iowa. Was Virginia turnout up or down from 2008? If down, your thoughts on why? Oh, it was way down. Turnout was above 10% just in the Republican primary in 2008. In Super Tuesday this year, the turnout was 5.7%. It was miserable. In fact, it was the lowest turnout ever recorded for any Republican presidential primary in Virginia. Although I'll grant you there have only been 4 since the first one in 1988. But it's obviously a factor produced by the 2 candidates on the ballot. You just had Romney and Ron Paul, and they weren't enough to generate the excitement needed for a larger turnout. Also, remember, the results weren't exactly endearing for Mitt Romney. To finish under 60%, to have a 59.5% victory, 40.5% for Ron Paul, is really remarkable. The entire superstructure in Virginia virtually supported Mitt Romney, and yet you had a split that was much closer than the pre-election polls predicted. The next Twitter question is from The Wonkery. Do you see a VP spot for Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich, or someone fresh and new? Well, it certainly won't be Rick or Newt. I'm not sure it will be someone fresh or new either, but it will be someone else. And now our last Twitter question, and for this I'm going to call in our House editor, our great Ohio expert, Kyle Kondik, who hails from the Buckeye State, and who a week ahead of the Ohio primary predicted that Romney would indeed pull it out in a close race and never wavered from that accurate prediction. Kyle?
Thanks, Larry. And the final question is about the Ohio House races that happened yesterday. The question is, if 3 incumbent reps lost in Ohio, Gene Schmidt, Mary Jo Kilroy, and Dennis Kucinich, does that portend anything for November? Probably not necessarily. Mary Jo Kilroy wasn't actually an incumbent, but she was a representative, Democratic representative, who lost in a Columbus area seat in 2010. She ended up losing a primary for a new seat that's sort of a Democratic vote sink in the city of Columbus. But she lost to Joyce Beatty, who's a longtime figure in Columbus politics, and most importantly, Beatty had the support of Mike Coleman, the mayor in Columbus, which ended up being very helpful to Beatty. So that, that wasn't necessarily a huge surprise. As for Dennis Kucinich, well, he was running against another incumbent, Marcy Kaptur in a district that ran from Toledo to Cleveland. And so somebody was going to lose there, although maybe there's still time for Dennis Kucinich to move off to Seattle to try to run in the state of Washington, as has sometimes been rumored. And I have to say the final upset yesterday in the primaries was Gene Schmidt's loss, Republican from the Cincinnati area. But Schmidt had always had a hard time in her primaries, and it seems like her close calls had finally caught up to her in 2012. So I don't know if we necessarily take from the House races in Ohio on Tuesday that incumbents are necessarily in a lot of trouble, but we'll see. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of the Video Crystal Ball, and we'll see you as the Republican candidates move down the road to Tampa.